31-minute mark. Coming up, why the QB position will prove to be critical in who wins the bout between the New York Football Giants and the Indianapolis Colts, with the playoff berth potentially on the line. Yes, my friends, it's OGP, the One Giant podcast, where we are your hosts over here. Adam Armbrecht breaking down the Brooklyn Nets on the Locked On Nets podcast with my boy Doug Norrie, and yonder there, the healthy, wealthy, and wise, the seasoned generational ticket holder, the ready to cheer for the playoff-bound New York Football Giants, Mr. Andrew Makowitz. How are we, sir?
I am so excited. You have New Year's Eve coming up. You get to watch the ball drop, have a few libations responsibly if you're of age. And then the next day, you get ready for the potential clinching victory for the New York Giants at MetLife against those pesky Indianapolis Colts.
You better believe it, sir, man. And we've talked a little bit just about the team. We've talked about Saquon this week. We've talked about Nick Foles and why it's kind of a juicy matchup here. And that's really where we wanted to start as we look inside of this game. Obviously, it feels like it sets up to be a plus matchup for Big Blue. But even beyond whether or not you think that Nick Foles or Ellinger or even Matt Ryan was going to be a dangerous foe under center when we came to this matchup, you go inside the numbers, and really what I wanted to focus in on is the wide receiver room. Because Michael Pittman Jr., when you go in and look at his stats, you'd say, hey, we've got a problem on our hands. This is a guy that has accumulated 90 catches on 128 yards. He's, only a couple touchdowns, actually. So that's a bit disappointing for him. But overall, he's been a threatening player. And Alec Pierce, a guy that we looked at in the draft that I was really excited about, thought the Giants should be taking a look at him. There's all these potential weapons. But when you go inside and look at the non-Matt Ryan games, because remember, Matt Ryan got benched for a couple of games here in late October in favor of Ellinger. So before he gets benched, 7 targets, before he got benched there, it was going to be 9 targets, 6 catches, 58 yards for Michael Pittman against the Tennessee Titans. That's a nice almost 10-yard per catch average. The following week, it's 9 targets, it's 7 catches, but it's only 53 yards with Ellinger. Then 3 targets, 6 catches, 22 yards that following week. And you go inside this Charger game, 7 targets, 4 catches, 39 yards. The point being is that some of the most explosive games that he has had this season were when you had a quarterback that was capable of still throwing that ball down the field. And overall, when you look in that QB room, I don't care if it is Ryan or Ellinger or Foles. What you know for sure is that collectively, that unit has thrown more interceptions than touchdowns. Matt Ryan is clearly the best quarterback they can play. Go check out the previous episode where Andy explains why he's not playing. And it really sets it up, I think, for the Giants getting back Adoree Jackson here to be downhill, aggressive, attacking defensively with kind of not a lot of risk of being exposed in the secondary.
Yeah, and well, Adam, you mentioned a bunch of key stats that got me thinking. Obviously the QB play has been subpar for the Indianapolis Colts. Doesn't matter who's been out there, but also it's been a very disappointing offensive line for them. Yeah. You think about having Quentin Nelson, who's potentially an all-pro guy every single year in, year out, but they just cannot get anything going on the offensive line, which, as we know, as Giant fans know very intimately, makes things much more difficult for the quarterback to throw, for receivers to get downfield and deep. It's the same problems that the Giants have had over the last year or two. The Colts are now just seeing it after having such a great offensive line for a while. Yeah. The first question that I had for you is, when you think about, Michael Pittman's probably not a number 1 wide receiver, but he can play well. He can accumulate stats. Yeah, he's probably a number 2. Paris Campbell's out there. You mentioned Alec Pierce is someone that's potentially coming on. We talk about the Giants being depleted in the wide receiver room. Which wide receiver room would you take? Would you take the Colts wide receiver room over the Giants or vice versa?
No, you'd still take the Colts wide receiver room, I think, because Pittman's not a true number 1, but he's really good. Paris Campbell is a bit of a, we'll call him like a filler kind of journeyman wide receiver for you. I mean, 54 catches on 76. Boy, it's a good, you know what? 100% healthy. Let me put it this way. 100% healthy with Wan'Dale Robinson and knowing how Hodgins has played, and we're going to talk about him in a second. It might be a lot closer than you'd like to think, but I'll flip it on you. If you put Daniel Jones on the Indianapolis Colts, how much better do all those wide receivers look? Because I think everyone would say the Colts probably win a handful more games this year. They look more dynamic this year, and all these guys have better stats if Daniel Jones is throwing the ball.
I would agree. And the reason why is because their offensive line has been so bad that at least he's got slightly more mobility.
Run, baby, run.
Yeah, like Adam. And you know what the number one most telling stat of all of this is? The player that leads the league in fumbles is Matt Ryan with 15 fumbles because they can't protect him. He has no mobility and he stands like a statue back in the pocket. It's impossible for them to protect him. And so I just find it fascinating. They're a team that is really trying to find their identity on offense. They have a transformative running back in Jonathan Taylor, who happens to be out for the season. And so they've been really trying to manufacture yards or sustain drives any way they can, and it really has not been working for the Colts recently.
I was trying to find, too, because you mentioned how many times has he fumbled this year, Matt Ryan?
15 fumbles.
15 fumbles combined with his 13 interceptions. So that means it's one rushing touchdown. So that means he has 15 touchdowns and 28 turnovers on the year. That's a very like second year Daniel Jones kind of vibe for Matt Ryan this season. So that being the case, I think, we talk about the key matchups. I mentioned Adoree Jackson coming back. I don't know who he has to match up on. Like, you want to say automatically take Pittman. I think you just kind of play it by feel. Who's looking the most dangerous? Okay, Adoree, you've had the extra time for rest. Get out there, stick to him like glue, lock him up, and then take Nick Foles, a subpar journeyman quarterback at this point in his career, and really put him in a hole here. Because the other piece of this, quickly, before we flip over to the Giants side, and specifically Daniel Jones, and also the wide receiver room, obviously, is that in the backfield. You mentioned they don't have Taylor this season, out with the injury. So now you start to look into there. And I guess this is the one thing I'm going to point out for the Giants defensively. I think, obviously, with Thibodeaux, obviously with Azeez Ojulari, with Dexter Lawrence, with Leonard Williams, like, you have the talent there. This is the one time when I don't feel like I should have to say, boy, they really don't have a great linebacking core right now. The depth, the second, I don't care. It doesn't matter. You're strong enough up front. The offensive line is suspect enough up front for the Colts. And when you look inside of it, the only real risk that I see here is you have Deion Jackson and you have Zach Moss. Now, Deion Jackson, so far this season, has not looked terribly dynamic. He's been very limited, had 13 for 55 2 weeks ago against Minnesota, but he hasn't really seen significant carries since the beginning of the year, and he's only averaging 3.4 yards a clip. The guy that I would be worried about, and potentially they'll have to shut down, is Zach Moss, because you know him from his Buffalo Bills days, and when he gets touches, again, 24 for 81 2 weeks ago, but 12 for 65 against the Chargers. He is currently averaging 4.5 yards per carry on the season. Obviously, that goes back to Buffalo, but there weren't a lot of rushes there when he was in Buffalo. So they're not getting like terribly skewed just because of his time in Buffalo. 60 touches, 268 yards. That, to me, is the most important thing. The Giants defensively have been gouged by the run game this season. You have to sell out and shut that down and trust that bad Nick Foles combined with some very good players, even though it's few and far between. Love, Adoree Jackson, even Moreau has been playing well, right? Opportunistic. They got to make the plays when the opportunities come. Landon Collins also probably critical in shutting down that run game.
You mentioned the run defense, been the Achilles heel for the Giants all season. They give up 5.4 yards per attempt. That is dead last in the NFL. And so when you look at this and say, what's the path to the Colts giving the Giants a run for their money? A consistent run game is something the Giants have struggled with that maybe the Colts can provide, knowing what you just said. We don't want to put the ball in the hands of Nick Foles to sit back in the pocket and pump the ball and hold the ball for a while, knowing that we also don't have the explosive wide receivers and the offensive line. And so, the Giants are also giving up a lot of those rushing yards, 145.9, which is 28th in the league. They're bottom 5 in not only yards per attempt, but also total yards. They just give up so many yards on the ground. If you're a Giants fan, you got to look at that and say, that is priority number one. Stop the run, whether it's Deion Jackson or Zach Moss, and make them as one-dimensional as humanly possible.
Yep, and then get after it and get turnovers in this game for sure. Flip the script over to the offensive side. At some point along the way here, there was some interesting tidbits around Daniel Jones, around the Giants, around wins above replacement. We'll talk about that when there's a time to catch our breath this season. For now, though, Daniel Jones came off an overall good game, one bad play, whatever. It is what it is. He's still having a really good season. When you come into this matchup, you look inside that wide receiver room, you say Richie James has been, for the most part, except maybe in fourth quarter key situations, pretty reliable to move the chains. Darius Slayton has been fairly consistent, but maybe the most important player, shockingly in a lot of ways, now over the last few weeks and coming into this game, Andy, is Isaiah Hodgins and what he's been able to showcase for this offense.
Yeah, and there's one thing that I think keeps getting lost with the Isaiah Hodgins piece of everything, and I want to give another nod, kudos to Joe Schoen for understanding this and identifying it. We talk about being able to build a roster by putting in the claim, and doing what he did with Isaiah Hodgins.
Right.
He was able to sign him and pick up his contract that he had from Buffalo, which guarantees his contract for next season being on the Giants. So where I think it's important is he's not just picking up a guy to tread water for this season, then we got to go back to the well or pay Isaiah Hodgins $5-10 million because he's performed so well. The Giants have Isaiah Hodgins for $870,000 next year with zero dead money associated. So the Giants can keep him for under $1 million and he could be a competent number 3, number 4 wide receiver for this team moving forward. And if the sky falls down, Adam, the Giants can get out from the contract for literally no cap hit whatsoever. So I think it's really important to just give a nod to Joe Schoen to say, what a great pickup that has been, not only to right the ship this season, but also give us depth next season with little downside whatsoever.
Yeah, I was looking over the cap here, and it only shows it as being underneath for 2022. So that could have nothing to do with, he's on a 4-year, $3.45 million contract in 2020. So it would, the years would match up on that he'll be under control. So they probably just don't have it updated accurately. And to your point, this is one of those instances where, normally a guy gets released and a lot of times it's money related. So you can put in the claim on him, but I really don't want to. I'll wait. I'll sign him as a free agent when I know that I can get my new contract in place that doesn't cost me as much. Rare opportunity where putting in the claim actually puts the Giants in a position to benefit off of it. And this is from Andy here. Hodgins signed a 2-year, $1.57 million contract with the Bills, including an average annual of $787 in 2022. Hodgins' base salary of $705 will carry a cap hit of $391. So there you go. Those are the specific numbers there. Yeah.
Yeah, so it basically, he signed a deal in 2020 to stay on the practice squad, kind of a 2-way deal. And then this previous offseason, he signed a 2-year deal at basically whatever's the league minimum. And so when the Giants claim him, they get that contract. They're basically saying we will assume that whole contract. And Adam, that's why I say kudos, because now we have a wide receiver who looks like he could be a part of this future for under $1 million. Like, he has contributed. I mean, I don't want to make the comparison, but I will say, you look at the stats of what Isaiah Hodgins has done as a Giant versus the stats that Kadarius Toney has had while being a Giant, and it's crazy the amount that he has contributed for the amount of capital and financial, commitments that Joe Schoen had to put to him has been tremendous for the Giants.
Well, and on a per game basis, we know what those numbers would look like, but whatever. But here's the point that I will talk about when it comes to Hodgins. Obviously, the eight receptions on 11 targets for 89 yards this past week is big, but go back and look over it, right? 4 targets, 4 catches, 6-4, 6 targets, 5 catches, 4-3, 3 for 3. When you go down the line here, he's performed in 8 games for the Giants this season and has 33 catches on 42 targets for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, listen, this last game obviously skews it in a big way, but you're leaving off a 17th game of the season here. If you just doubled it up and said, this guy could be a 60 to 70 reception a year player, he could be giving you 700-800 yards a season, and maybe can give you 4 or 5 touchdowns a year. And when you talk about it in a situation where he's currently playing on a roster where if he is a really maybe he's starting to become like a high level 3 and Darius Slayton is like a solid 2-ish, like there's still no number 1 on this roster. And we always talk about that. Put a number 1 in place and all of a sudden he can have an opportunity to flourish taking on the third potentially matchup on that defensive side. Do you think that in this game, Andy, as we kind of we could loosely turn our attention to the predictions here a little bit, but do you think that this is an exposable secondary for the Colts where not just Hodgins, but also Darius Slayton and also Richie James and Daniel Bellinger back on the right foot, and even Saquon Barkley's getting more involved in that passing game? Is this an attackable unit for the Colts, or do you look at this as back to basics? Let's just drain this clock, run the ball, and put it away.
Well, so the defense gives up almost 24 points a game, really where they've struggled. I mean, that's bottom third in the league. It's not great, but that's just compared to what their offense does, which it stinks. They score 16 and a half points a game. They are 31st in the league. They just cannot manufacture points on offense. Adam, the bigger thing for them also is they give up 2 turnovers per game on offense on average. They are last in the league in turnover differential. So the offense can't manufacture points. They turn the ball over and leave that defense kind of hung out to dry, saying, good luck trying to stop people. And the advanced metrics don't actually look too bad for them. When you look at some of the different yards per play, yards per rush, they're 4.1 yards per rush on the defensive side of the ball. That's good for 7th in the league. They really don't give up that many.
Their defense is kind of middle of the road in both passing and run defense, right? Like they're 122 against the run, but like in the spectrum of the league, it's actually kind of like, they're somewhere between, 18 and 12-ish or 14. Like it's right in the muddled middle of the pack. Like it's to your point, it's not terrible, at least on paper. It's the eye test that bothers you.
Well, it's more that the offense puts this defense in bad situations where they're turning the ball over. And so the cumulative stats are not going to actually show. But when you're given a short field to all these teams and they only have to go 25 yards to score a touchdown, it's going to just skew the points per game. The other issue is the Colts defense doesn't actually make the other team turn the ball over that much. So they're less than 1 turnover per game on the defensive side. So literally their turnover differential is the worst in the league. So they can't get off the field, but there's also short fields that the offense isn't really helping them out with. And so for that, the Colts defense is an okay defense. I expect this to not be a huge high scoring game for the Giants. It's really, I'm looking squarely at the defense to say, this is a putrid offense for the Colts. You need to be able to take a stand, and we just need to get to a certain point threshold to win.
So at that point, then, my friend, do you want to turn your attention to our predictions, or would you like to go into the bet of the week? Because I already, if you follow me over on Twitter, which by the way, at AMac214, at Adam Armbrecht over on Twitter, at One Giant Podcast, we throw out some drips and drabs. We have some fun over there. I already gave my prediction over there. It's been up there for days. I think I posted it on Monday what my prediction was for this game. But your choice. You want to get back on track because Andy's bet of the week. I threw it out there about how you were talking about last week about touchdown versus, over on the yardage. We could have taken touchdown over the yardage for Isaiah Hodgins and absolutely cleaned up.
Bellinger had his fumble. Bellinger caught a 2-point conversion, not the touchdown. It was a tough day for me at the office in terms of Andy's bet of the week. Adam, because you've already kind of put yours out into the ether, why don't you talk a little bit about your prediction first?
20-0. That's my prediction, New York Football Giants. Like, shutout victory. Nick Foles is a statue. He's a shell of himself. They have some weapons, but the offensive line isn't good enough to give a bad quarterback enough time to expose it. The defensive front is healthy. The defensive front is looking more dynamic. Kayvon Thibodeaux has come on. Azeez Ojulari has come on. You just mentioned the turnovers. I expect an interception in this game from the secondary. I expect a fumble in this game from the front seven. Like, this is a game that the defensive unit should come out early and often and put it away. And maybe I'm even lowballing the 20 points. I'm kind of looking at it and saying, like, hey, be methodical. Let Saquon do some of the work. Take the chunk plays when they're available, right? Be up in this game. Be up 14-0 at half. And then just kind of bleed the clock out in the third and fourth quarters. Get a couple of field goals. Gano, Mr. Automatic. And just be done with this thing. I could go bigger on it, but if I want the shutout, I'm going to say that it's long, sustained drives. They play controlled. This is the dominant game that you'll want. And I don't mean big, flashy stats. I just mean you're trying to go to the playoffs. The Colts are trying to tank. You should be getting this victory. And I expect it to be a Daniel Jones game where at the end of it, this would be one of those ones where I probably applaud his performance, even though the stats will probably tell you, like, Was it anything to write home about? It was everything to write home about because there was no mistakes, no errors, methodical approach, lead the team, win the game.
Adam, your
Hi.
20-0 shutout. I mean,
Yeah.
it conjures up back in the early 2000s, me being at the NFC Championship game against the Minnesota
Oh,
Vikings,
yeah.
watching the Giants as 8 or 9 point underdogs win 41-0 and
That's right.
shut out the prolific offense that had Randy Moss, Chris Carter, the whole 9 yards, Dante Culpepper, that team. What I will say is, if you were that confident, Adam,
Left those Vikings a little salty.
oh, I like that. Your prediction will pay 250-1 if you feel like getting in on that for that exact score of 20-0.
That's right.
My bet of the week
Money.
feels like I've given this one out one time before against the Commanders. It ended up happening the second time they played the Commanders, but this just feels like a defensive touchdown for the Giants in this game.
That makes it 27-0 then in my scenario.
Even better. I like that. And what I'm thinking is you have, hopefully Azeez Ojulari is fine to play. You have
Yeah.
Kayvon Thibodeaux out there. You have Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams. The whole gang is there ready to just maul Nick Foles at any chance they can. Remember, they give up the most turnovers in the league. They have the worst turnover differential in the league. This feels like the Giants, it's about 4.5-1 on your money for them to be able to score a touchdown.
Yeah.
You're going to get at least 2 cracks at this where the Giants either pick up a fumble or get an interception. It's just, can they take it down for victory? I'm with you, Adam. This feels like a game the Giants need to win and need to win convincingly. I won't be upset if they end up winning by a field goal by any means necessary, but it really does feel like this is the time for the team to just put the pedal down, make the playoffs, get everybody excited about what they're building. I've got the final score 23-6. I'm in the same type of game you are. I think
2 field goals.
I think the Colts will kind of get down the field a little bit, but not really. And I could just see them plodding along a little bit. They don't really want to win this game. The Giants have everything to play for. Give us a 23-6 sound victory for the Giants. Defense looks great. Offense does just enough. And onward to the playoffs, we start thinking.
And just to give you a little bit here inside of those betting ones, just little drips and drabs that you can think about. Daniel Jones has hit the interception under in 10 of his last 12 games. Daniel Jones has hit the completion over in 10 of his last 14 games. Isaiah Hodgins has hit the reception over in his last 4 games straight. So all those props that you see out there, take a look at the past couple of weeks and see if they've moved that line a little bit for Hodgins. But all those numbers are hitting there with pretty a high level of consistency. And then I mentioned about Pittman earlier. How about this? He's hit the over on receptions in 11 out of 16 games, but has hit the under in 11 out of 16 games. So that's that combination of bad QB play. They're still going to throw it to him because he's their number one, but the yardage plays haven't necessarily been there. So it'd be interesting to see whether or not it might buck the trend and take the under on his reception total, because I think, again, they may just try to lock him up and take him off the board. But there's some fun ones out there for you. And obviously, you think about the first quarter under as well here for this one for the Indianapolis Colts. 13 out of their 16 games, excuse me. They have been under in that first quarter, so they don't get out to an early, fast start. I expect the defense to be dominant early for the Giants. A lot of opportunities out there. 250-1. Looks like the shutout is about to make me a massive chunk of change at the end of the day.
At the end of the day,
the
Giants have the ability to ring in 2023, day one of 2023, with a
undefeated
playoff
in the new year, baby.
I mean, what a great way to start 2023. That'll kick off a bunch of New Year's resolutions, which is don't doubt this coaching staff. Don't doubt what they're building on this team. Let's go out and get a win against a team that has nothing to play for, and we can start thinking about what the playoff picture looks like. And Adam, who would have thought we could be talking about, are the Giants resting players in week 18? That might be another storyline, but it sounds like that could be for another day.
You better believe it, buddy. Whatever you guys do out there celebrating, ringing in the new year, whether it's with family and friends, whether you're a single guy or gal out on the prowl, go ahead and make some bad choices, but make them in a smart way. Be healthy, be safe, have a lot of fun. We'll see you in the new year, hopefully celebrating a New York Football Giants victory, hopefully celebrating a New York Football Giants playoff berth as we continue to look forward to the closeout of this 2022-23 season. Andy, People get over on YouTube to follow us. They subscribe. They like, they share, they comment. They get over the podcast feed. It's in their ears. It's like we're their own little internal monologue throughout the day.
Play it on New Year's
Eve to help support the podcast. What's that?
Play it on New Year's Eve. Why not?
Yeah. You know
what? OGP show. Charcuterie plate, little champagne, cocktail. Maybe a couple why not? Bring it in with a little OGP live, Yeah,
who doesn't love it? Who doesn't like it? Who doesn't want more of it? But until next time, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.